Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Belgian Global webinar called Cyprus, a pawn in the Turkish Eastern Mediterranean Strategy, ? My name is Arne Strand. I'm a researcher director with CMI, and I'm joined with Siri Neset and Kjetil Fosshagen that I will introduce a bit more in detail later on. Just a word on the proceedings here, because our two presenters will give their presentations, and we will have a bit of initial discussion on some of the issues identified. But we will also very much invite questions from participants here. If you post it in the chat or in the question and answer sessions here, either on Zoom or if you're on YouTube, please do that. And we will try to come back to those questions. The background for this seminar now is that Turkey has become one of the most influential actors in the Mediterranean region and has recently intensified its foreign policy initiatives. The Blue Homeland Doctrine has emerged as a pillar of Turkey's security policy. This strategy aims to leverage Turkey's regional, economic, political, and military superiority to assess claims over contested regions of the Eastern Mediterranean. You probably have noted the tension that has been regarding the claims for exclusive economic zones, both outside of Cyprus, but also areas close to Libya. This has brought them in conflict not only with the EU on a political side, but also militarily with Greece and also recently with France. So the tension has really increased. But then also comes Turkey, after President Erdogan taking on more of a presidential rule, has increasingly been in confrontation in the broader region. We have seen confrontations with Russia in Syria. We have seen confrontation in Libya, including France. And we have this rather strange relationship with Russia, with a NATO member buying weapon systems from Russia and still almost being at war with them, both in Syria and Libya. So all of these tension has been brewing up recently. We have then also the situation where Turkey at the moment is hosting 3.5 million Syrian refugees and a number of other refugees as well, and in one way preventing them from coming into Europe. At the same time, receiving support for hosting these refugees from the European Union and Nordic countries, among others. So it has positioned itself centrally Turkey, but it's a lot of questions regarding all its policies, and then not recently more a question of where are they really heading, taking on the confrontation in the middle administration. Cyprus on its side is also a country that has experienced conflict for a long period of time, though not at the same level as what's going on in the neighborhood now. It gained independence from UK early in 1960. This led to intercommunal violence between the majority Greek Cypriot community and the Turkish Cypriot minority, and the deployment of UN troops in 1963, the UNFOCYP that still is in Cyprus. A Greek Cypriot coup d'etat in 1974 that aimed at incorporation of Cyprus into Greece was followed by a Turkish military intervention. Civil war followed, division of the island, great movement of people both to the north and south, and then the establishment of the Greek Cypriot, what you can define as Southern Cyprus, that was internationally recognized as the Republic of Cyprus, and the establishment of the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus in 1993 that has only been recognized by Turkey. The entire island was then accepted as EU member in 2004 without any resolution of the conflict that was aimed at follow, but it hasn't. UN plans for reunification has until now failed. The latest initiatives was by Norwegian negotiator Barth Eide. New negotiations are under the way, but this is still unresolved. The latest then is that President Erdogan now has changed the mind, the Turkish position, from actually going from reunification to support for a two-country solution, which then raises really the question if a negotiated settlement can be followed. There is a meeting at the European Parliament at the 10th of December that has possible sanction of Turkey on the agenda, which again can increase the the tension. So to understand what's going on and possibly what might be happening, we have with us two experts to help us out today. Siri Neset is a political psychologist and associated researcher at CMI that is focused on rhetoric, perception, foreign policy decision-making, identity, and the links between political ideology, power, and violence. She has been the main author of several recent reports on Turkey, where there has been a great collaboration with a number of Turkish researchers. I think the one that is out and available at the CMI webpage is the one called Turkish International Relations that I can recommend. Kjetil Fosshagen is a social anthropologist and associated professor at Högskolan på Västlandet. His research focuses on the conflict of northern Cyprus from an historical perspective. He has researched the Cypriots' ambivalent attitudes towards Turkey and Europe through everyday negotiations and conflict. His PhD thesis is called Island of Conjuncture, Social Modalities and Historical Trajectories in Cyprus. So we have two very well qualified presenters here to give us insight. So if you, Siri, would like to start on the broader perspective, where is Turkey heading? What are their ambitions in the Mediterranean? What are their global ambitions? Please.
Thank you, Arne. Well, I will outline some issues and draw some lines, mainly as the situation is seen from Turkey. I also thought that I should say something about Turkey's strategy, as well as what drives Turkey's actions and what those actions are and likely will be moving forward. I will start off by arguing that to some degree, Turkey's action in the East Med are judged internationally through the lenses of the perception of President Erdogan in general, and through Turkey's recent hard power moves in other regions. These perceptions clouds the very fact that Turkey has some legitimate interests, as well as it withdraws authority from Turkish complaints about how the situation in the Mediterranean is handled, especially then by outside actors. That being said, the Turkish leadership's approach to forward its interests and shake up the status quo includes that Ankara regularly conducts seismic research operations in the disputed territorial waters of the Mediterranean, and Turkish research vessels are often accompanied by naval escorts, which in several instances has resulted in close calls at sea. Turkey is seeking a stronger naval presence supported by an ambitious initiative of shipbuilding and modernization. And of course, such actions do not serve to calm the situation in the East Med. So tensions over Turkey's surveying activities in the Aegean and the Eastern Mediterranean have their roots in unfinished and unimplemented sovereignty issues that were left over from the 1923 Treaty of Lausanne, which formally ended the conflict involving the Ottoman Empire and established the new sovereign Turkish Republic. The treaty's Aegean map was particularly complicated and has remained disputed since. Also further complicating is Turkey's historical role as the patron of the rights of Turkish Cypriots. And more recently, the temperature was definitively heightened when in January, I think it was 2019, Cyprus, Egypt, Greece, Israel, and Jordan created an Eastern Mediterranean gas forum. Then adding Italy and backed by the US, the forum was formalized in September with an then extended scope to also include the development of a regional energy market. So to balance being excluded from this forum, Turkey signed an economic zone, exclusive economic zone, an EEZ agreement, and a military cooperation agreement with Libya at the end of 2019. So with the signing of that EEZ agreement, Turkey kind of in a way obstructed cooperation efforts between Cyprus, Israel, Egypt, and Greece, to build the East Med pipeline that would basically carry gas from the East Mediterranean to Europe and then bypassing Turkey. Furthermore, the deal also provides the Turkish leadership with leverage in negotiations and conflicts with Cyprus, Greece, Egypt, and France in the Eastern Mediterranean. So the current tensions in the Mediterranean, similar to the tensions in the Middle East, it highlights kind of a major shift in the region, and that is the decline of the US power and rise of regional powers competing for more influence. And the first 2 decades of the 2000s have witnessed tremendous changes in the global order that we are kind of only starting to understand. The US as a hegemonic power has abandoned its historical role as the guardian of the global order. The Trump presidency, we can say definitively only intensified these tendencies, as the US administration increasingly opted for bilateral agreements while targeting multilateral institutions. And all these developments have gradually loosened the transatlantic alliance bound, reviving national initiatives, and weakened Western-led multilateral institutions. And what we know is that this process will increasingly allow middle powers, such as Turkey, to seize the chance for upward mobility in the global system. So why am I kind of highlighting this more overarching structural issue? Well, it's because the Mediterranean, although one might analyze the situation as being all about claims for maritime borders and hydrocarbon deposits, well, it's not. It reflects a wider security thinking on the part of the two countries directly in conflict, that is Greece and Turkey, sub-regional and regional actors, such as Israel and Egypt, and major powers such as Russia and France, as well as the US. So if we look at Turkey, we see, with regards to strategy then, that the rhetoric revolving around the concept named Blue Homeland, or Mavi Vatan in Turkish, has emerged as a kind of strategy on Turkey's policies in the region. And this concept also links it to the Aegean and also the Black Sea. And the Blue Homeland kind of, I think they call it a doctrine, but I'm not sure if it qualifies to that. But in any case, it has 2 pillars. The first is intended to indicate Turkish areas of maritime jurisdiction under national sovereignty, such as territorial waters, the continental shelf, and the EEZs, while the second pillar is intended to create a maritime worldview for Turkey. So with regards to the first pillar, so Ankara is certainly keen on getting its share of the region's energy resources. Turkey suffers from energy import dependency. So even at limited volumes, Mediterranean gas reserves would be a welcome addition to Turkey's import portfolio, if only to increase Ankara's leverage against existing suppliers like Russia. Moreover, Ankara has also long pursued the position of a regional energy hub, which will require the ability to attract gas imports from multiple regions. The second component is about the regional ambition of Turkey. The Mediterranean has been transformed into a region of vital importance with a recent return of great power competition to project power in the Levant region and in North Africa. So establishing a presence in the Mediterranean, in other words, is seen not only as necessary to become an influential actor in the regional politics, but it's almost crucial to have a foothold in Africa. So with the deal between Libya and Turkey, Turkey's goal was to create an interregional connectivity. And this concept, interregional connectivity, that is developed by Professor Michael Tanchum at the University of Navarra in Spain. This regional, interregional connectivity, then it will cement Turkey's status as a major actor in North Africa and enhancing its reach beyond. That is because Turkey's rising influence in Libya's neighboring Tunisia and Algeria, that with Tunisia's vital Mediterranean ports and Algeria's trans-Saharan highway, this then positions Turkey to play a major role in an emerging nexus of commercial routes that connects West Africa to Europe and the Middle East. And with this, then Turkey is entering kind of a very intense and complex competition over the nexus of trans-Mediterranean trade routes, energy transit routes, and industrial manufacturing value chains. So, if we look at some of the main drivers of Turkish Mediterranean policy, that is, in other words, what issues, situations, perceptions that prompts the Turkish leadership to act towards fulfilling their strategy. Very crucial is the siege mentality and general feeling of loneliness in international affairs. And these are strong held perceptions that feed the reading of regional and international situations. And that is both amongst the Turkish leadership and the general public. And this siege mentality has both historical and geographical roots, whereas the feeling of loneliness is more derived from the trust issues with Turkey's alliance partners. So in the East Med, Ankara considers both the Energy Forum, the East Med pipeline as elements of a larger effort to box Turkey to the margins of the Mediterranean. And the fact that the Energy Forum, the East Med pipeline, and other regional initiatives are being supported by the US and the EU kind of further contributes to the conviction that Turkey is being sidelined by its allies. In addition, and even though the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum falls short of a formal military alliance, the partnership does extend into the area of security cooperation, including several joint military exercises and bilateral defense cooperation agreements. Turkey has few allies in a very complex and very conflict-ridden neighborhood. And this feeling is enhanced by an understanding that its allies, such as the European countries and the US, are not acting in connection with Turkey on economic, political, or security issues. But these trust issues are not only due to the actions taken, or to be more specific, not taken by Turkey's Western allies in the aftermath of the coup d'etat attempt in July 2016, but equally from the West's Syria policies, Libya policies, the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean, and Turkey's EU relations. Perceptions of siege mentality and loneliness are being reinforced by the current rhetoric of the country's political leaders, as well as acted upon in policy development and practice, and as such creating a vicious circle of self-fulfilling prophecies. And apart from this, another driver is any opportunity aiding the recovery of the Turkish economy that is in really bad shape. The Turkish GDP is expected at $650 billion in 2020, And this is a drop of 25% from 2016. And this can really not be tolerated for a country whose ruling party's main political agenda is based on sustainable economic growth. Finally, power competition drives both the policies of Turkey and other regional countries in the Mediterranean. The Arab Spring uprisings from 2010 and onwards ultimately speeded up the regional power competition along two regional axes of power. One that is led by Saudi Arabia and backed by the UAE, that is the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Egypt, with support from the US and Israel. The second axis is led by Iran with its various Shia proxies across the region, including but not limited to Hezbollah, Assad regime in Syria, and the Iraqi central government. And this axis is then backed by a transactional Russian support. Turkey, meanwhile, have teamed up with Qatar to create a third axis with expanded muscles up to Libya and Azerbaijan. And this third axis is challenging the first axis that is led by Saudi Arabia in the Gulf, in the Eastern Mediterranean and Libya, and is challenging the second axis that is led by Iran in Syria, northern Iraq, and partly in the Caucasus. So, and this situation is made even more complicated by Turkey's confrontations of Russia in Libya, Syria, and recently in Nagorno-Karabakh, its confrontations of the US in Iraq and Syria, its confrontations with Israel in the Palestine from different blocs there, and outsiders, France and Greece in the Mediterranean. So this power competition shapes Turkey's threat perceptions, it drives actions, and exemplifies a major risk in all regions, such as the Mediterranean. So what exactly are the actions that is being used and will most likely be used in the future in similar situation from Turkey? Turkey will act to secure its interest actively in the region, which will highlight Turkish perceptions of areas of maritime jurisdiction, such as territorial waters, the continental shelf and the EEZs, and will involve naval forces when deemed necessary. Turkish strategic thinking would not allow the possibility of control over the Eastern Mediterranean and or Cyprus by Greece, that is seen as the same hostile country that is controlling its access to open seas through the Aegean. And finally, Turkey will continue to counter France and Russia in the Libyan theater by opting for US support and by internationalization of the political solution process with the involvement of European powers in addition to France. So to conclude, I have three arguments. First, with most of its trade crossing the East Med, Turkey's interests are not served by destabilizing the security of the East Med maritime domain. Secondly, the development of any future Africa to Turkey commercial corridors requires a peaceful Eastern Mediterranean. And finally, with the Turkey-Libya deal, the protracted conflict in Cyprus becomes highly relevant due to the fact that without a solution to the Cyprus conflict, as far as I can see, there can be no conclusion on the map of exclusive economic zones in the Eastern Mediterranean. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Siri. Can I just have two follow-up questions? Because for clarity, did I understand you correctly that actually Turkey today is dependent on Russia for their energy resources? And secondly, this with the emphasis on Africa, would that at any chance bring them then on into a conflict with China as well, that we haven't so far not mentioned, because of their large ambitions for trade and trading routes through Africa as well? And maybe thirdly, has there been a major change in Turkey's relationship with both the US and the European Union and Europe, to use that term, following the coup d'etat that took place in Turkey? Because it seems to me that that was a kind of shift where they felt that they didn't really get what they thought was necessary support following it. If you just can clarify, and then we will move on to Kjetil.
Yeah, okay, I can be short and then we can discuss it more later. But with regards to energy imports, yes, Turkey is absolutely dependent on Russian imports. They used to trade with Iran, but since the sanctions, they don't. So Russia is the main supplier. So definitely. With regards to China and Africa, well, that picture is not clear yet. And what I know is that Turkey is very suspicious of China's activities. And even though there has been initiatives taken from China into Turkey, for example, with the building of the new canal in Istanbul. But as far as I know, Turkey is not trusting China and have not made up their mind yet, I think, on how to handle China in both in Africa and their initiatives towards Turkey. Yes, definitely, the coup d'etat was a major turning point. Of course, the relations wasn't picture perfect before either, but the fact that the West kind of reacted so late when the coup happened, and then after the coup kind of conditions their support for Turkey and what they had gone through by also heavily criticizing the policies taken after the coup, was not seen as a good practice seen from Turkey. But we should not put this as the sole element. Because, as I said, the policies that the West has taken in Syria and in Libya and also in the Eastern Mediterranean are seen as not acting in together with Turkey and understanding their interests and threat perceptions. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Siri. Kjetil, Siri pointed out the importance of Cyprus. So can you take us a bit into Cyprus and some of the dilemmas that both Cyprus is faced with, Cyprus within the EU is faced with, and then of course now the bigger picture with Turkey as well, please.
Yeah, thank you. I will try to give a sort of short historical outline of the relation to between the two communities in Cyprus and their so-called homelands. The main point is that Cyprus has for very long been both a parameter of regional and globalized tensions, as well as being a catalyst for such tensions. A second point that I'm going to make is that the issue of sovereignty in Cyprus is crucial to bear that in mind, that involves ideas of nation, ideas of history, and also maybe ideas of Europe and the boundaries of Europe, I think. So we shouldn't leave that out of a discussion, that the discussion is solely on strategies and so on, although both are important. Well, if we start with 1878 in Cyprus, that's the year that the British take over administration of Cyprus. It was still under Ottoman sovereignty, but they took over. At that point, you have the Greek Cypriot community celebrating the arrival of the British because they expected to be unified with Mother Greece. In the Turkish or the Muslim community, you have a sense of shock and a sense of being cast into an unknown future. So there was a big debate in the Turkish Cypriot community at that time. What are we going to do? And many people migrated to Ottoman lands, you know, to Istanbul or to Lebanon or Syria or Egypt, or wherever they had connections or roots. Of course, a lot of them stayed on, so they made up around 20% of the population. At that time, you know, when the British came, the Greeks in Cyprus already were integrated in a network of Greek nationalism. And the Greek nationalism at this time was expansionist and what they call irredentist. You know, the big cause was to redeem all the Greeks living outside the present state of Greece. And it's connected to this, what they call the Megali idea, the idea of Greater Greece, you know, that was became very critical in the 1920 conflict in Anatolia. Whereas the Turks, the Ottoman Empire was of course not a nation state, and there was no established nationalism at that time. So you get that with Ataturk in, you know, the establishment of the Turkish Republic around 1920. So then what happens in Cyprus in the two communities is always closely reflecting the sort of situation in Greece and Turkey, and the Turks in Cyprus follow, of course, the elite follows that, mainly the elite follows that development and establishment of Turkish nationalism from the 1920s on. But it's crucial to sort of recognize that this island, although it is an island, I mean, it's not an isolated place. Even in the early 19th century, you have Greek volunteers going to fight against the Ottomans in 1821. Very small group, but still. And you had very, very high sort of awareness of what was going on in the other community, what was going on in Crete, what was going on in Crimea, what was going on elsewhere. At this time, you know, the Greek Cypriots wanted a union with Greece, and it was not quite clear what the Turks wanted. But at first they wanted a return to Ottoman sovereignty, Ottoman rule. And then if you move to the 1950s, 60s, I mean, this historical sketch will be very superficial, but still. In 1950s and 60s, you have this nationalist, ethno-nationalist conflict, and you have a Greek Cypriot campaign for what they call enosis, the union with Greece. From 1955, you have a paramilitary campaign against British rule, and you also have the start of ethnic killings and so on, as a sort of more or less a byproduct of the fight for, although the Greek fight against the British rule. And the Turkish Cypriot paramilitary organization and nationalism was, I think we can characterize that as mainly being responsive to the Greek Cypriot organization and rhetoric and so on. And then in 1960, as you mentioned, Arne, you have the establishment of a shared republic, the Republic of Cyprus, which was the product of negotiations between Britain, Greece, and Turkey. And so there was an independent state of Cyprus, with a power sharing model between Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. And that was not what the Greek Cypriots had wanted. It was not at all what they wanted. They wanted a union with Greece. The Turkish Cypriots were more content, I think, and they had this guarantee. The vice president was going to be Turkish and the president Greek, and so on. And this power sharing model went all through all levels of society. And up to that, until that point, the Turkish Cypriot position was that they wanted a partition of the division of the island, what they call Taksim. But then in 1963, this shared republic breaks down, and actually what the Greek Cypriots do is that they alter the constitution while the Turkish Cypriot politicians have withdrawn from the parliament in protest against violence. So they altered the constitution, but they did that in an unconstitutional way. And there was a German president of the constitutional committee or court, I can't remember exactly the term, but he actually withdrew in protest against this alteration of the constitution, because what they did was more or less to remove the power sharing model. So that's actually a big, very little discussed matter in this dispute, that the sovereignty that the south of Cyprus holds today, rests on a it's not the same. The constitution is not actually the same as in this 1960 republic, because they changed it, and for practical reasons and a very complicated juridical situation, they have been recognized as having legitimate sovereignty over the entire island, and that's a crucial thing in the whole problem of Cyprus today. And then there was violence in 1963. Sort of major violent incidents in the cities and so on, and the Turkish Cypriots withdrew into armed enclaves, and on very small territory in total. So the Turkish Cypriots perceived this as sort of more or less being thrown out of the state and of the economy and of society. So from 63 onwards, you have more or less a sort of social, economic, and political partition of the island. It was eased somewhat towards the end of the 60s, but I think there was a very high sense of insecurity in this, living in these as refugees in these enclaves, and often there were a lot of disappearances of Turkish Cypriots when they had to move between the enclaves. You had paramilitary roadblocks and so on, and so kidnappings, disappearances. Of course, there are two versions of this. The Greek Cypriots emphasized the Turkish strategy of doing this and the interest of creating a partition. And Turkey was absolutely involved, as well as Greece was heavily involved in supplying weapons and financing. But the situation for the Turkish Cypriot community was that within these enclaves, they became totally dependent on Turkey, and they were ruled by, they were administered by a paramilitary organization. The paramilitary became the sort of state, and that basically continues after you have the Turkish intervention in '74 and the partition of the island. You have the president Denktaş, who was actually the leader of the paramilitary, or the entire Turkish Cypriot community during the enclave period. And he is very powerful, and you have in '74 you have this a lot of Greek Cypriots then flee to the south, and you have a massive import of basically poor peasants from Turkey, from Anatolia, who come in as settlers and fill the empty farms and the empty houses and so on, and you have a highly nepotist and corrupt government. I think that's sort of not controversial to say at all under Denktaş. You have also a sort of very difficult situation for the left wing. They have almost what you say, berufsverbot. I don't know what you say in English. They're very difficult to find jobs. So many of them left for Turkey or Britain. Yes, and this settler policy from Turkey was. There are documents showing that this was an active recruitment, whether it was meant as a cultural colonization or a sort of strategic thing, or it was basically economic. I think a mixture of that. But this also created tensions. I mean, in the Turkish Cypriot population, they felt being colonized by Turkey. But this is highly ambivalent to them. I mean, they also felt rescued. I think that goes for a lot. I mean, not only the right wing. This is ambivalent feeling. Turkey rescued them from a sort of years and years, decades of insecurity, quite aggressive Greek nationalism, But at the same time, you had this presence of the military and Turkish dominance, absolutely Turkish dominance in Cyprus. But then we moved to 2000. You know, they tried to establish the independent state. It's not very successful, and you have a miserable economic situation in after partition in the Turkish Cypriot community. You know, I think Turkey pays something like 70% of the annual budget still, maybe more today. And then in year 2000, the EU decides to accept the Republic of Cyprus as a member. It becomes a member in 2004. In 2004, there was this referendum over the UN peace plan, Annan plan, which was rejected by 75% of the Greek Cypriots and accepted by 65% of the Turkish Cypriots. And after that referendum, the EU promised the Turkish Cypriots that the heavy sanctions against Turkish Cypriot community that has really crippled totally the economy. There is no economy. There's no hope. You know, that you're living on. If you get this job in the state or the municipality, you're secure. But otherwise, it's very difficult. The EU promised that these sanctions would be lifted or would be eased at least, but nothing like that has happened, and that has created this feeling of major injustice, because prior to the as a sort of following this referendum, there was a big peace movement or reunification movement in the Turkish Cypriot community, and the power shifted from Denktaş and the hardline Turkey-aligned right-wing parties shifted to the left, to the left-wing parties, and you had Talat as a president in 2005, and then there was a great optimism that first they were hoping that there would be a reunification, and then they were hoping for better relations with the Greek Cypriots and at least a better economy. But I think that what happened was that the sort of steam went out of this hope, and gradually the left wing lost its support, and in 2015 the old party, right-wing party, came back to power, and but then you still had this the former president Akıncı. He was a sort of independent, peace-minded, very, very peace-oriented man also. But this year, in 2020, he also lost the presidential election to the right-wing Tatar, backed by Erdogan. So I think what's happened is that a feeling of resignation, of absolute resignation among Turkish Cypriots, that okay, there's no chance in any way to have a peace solution, to have a federal state. There's absolutely no desire. And of course, the big mistake, so to say, by the UN and the EU and the international community was to accept the Republic of Cyprus into the EU before you had reunification. That's sort of clear. That made things almost impossible, because the Greeks and the Greek Cypriots can now veto any change, and they don't have any. At least I cannot see any major incentive for changing the status quo, apart from, of course, the sort of loss of territory. That is an incentive, but they can almost dictate the premise, or not the premises, but the conditions of that. I think, Siri, you referred to the opening up of Varosha, the former glorious tourist suburb outside Famagusta, that has been kept as a negotiation card. That's at least the common interpretation, as a ghost city since 1974, and that was opened up, and Erdogan also visited it in a highly symbolic visit. I think it was last month or something. Yeah. So that seems to be a sort of provocation, and maybe also a sort of signal saying that we don't believe in. I mean, it's difficult to say what it means or what the intention is, but yes, there is the major point is that I think there is a really resigned feeling here. But to get back to this, the question of sovereignty, and I think that it is important that we look at that the question of sovereignty in Cyprus also as closely connected to, of course, to nationalism, but also to the sort of sense of historical justice or injustice, and the course of history and what is Europe and what is not Europe. From both sides, that's crucial, and not at least for the Turkish Cypriots, because a lot of them see themselves as European in some sense. They also, of course, have a Turkish identity, but the nature of that Turkish identity has, in a sense, been much more debatable since the AKP government or the whole Islamic movement. But what I think is happening now, the situation is that the EU and the Greeks and the Greek Cypriots are actually pushing the Turkish Cypriot community into the arms of Turkey completely, because they are continuing the embargo and they're continuing the non-recognition and continuing the sort of, as far as I know, the sort of power-based negotiation attitude. So maybe we could go from, but that's the thing we are going to discuss, I think. Maybe Erdogan seems to signal a sort of annexation intention, but that's, I think we will discuss that afterwards. That would be that would imply a lot of problems for Turkey and Turkish Cypriots. Yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Thanks a lot, Kjetil. I invite for questions from those who are following it now as well. But I wonder if I just follow up on this last thing, because I fully follow your argument, Kjetil. That's my discussion with Turkish Cypriots as well. They really feel that they are sacrificed on all sides. But I'm thinking about what we mentioned about the EU meeting coming up, because if EU then is imposing more sanctions, they are actually making life even more difficult for the Turkish Cypriots. So all the agreements being made, all the hopes of actually EU coming to their rescue can then physically become even more difficult, and depends on Turkey even bigger if the EU actually take a step and impose more sanctions. So, and Siri, you came into it a bit as well, because this can actually be used in Turkey against the objectives, saying that we should never have trusted the EU. So can again the Turkish Cypriots really become the victims of what is a power game, but where the intention of supporting them is actually backfiring on the Turkish Cypriots? If we can start on some comments there.
Yeah, I think that it will, if I can reply to that, I think really that this is counterproductive measures from the EU, and if they do that, if they sort of make the sanctions even harder, more strict, they will. I think they will definitely just remove all hopes of a solution, and there will be no possibility. I mean, the Turkish Cypriots have no energy. They have problems with drinking water supply and so on. I mean, the independence is so massive, and when they had, there were attempts to, for instance, start agricultural exports from the Turkish Cypriot side, but it has to go via the Greek side, and it has been sabotaged and blocked all the time. So I think the feeling of sort of betrayal and injustice and hopelessness is just going to increase.
Siri, you share that?
And also, yes, definitely, and also, moreover, as Kjetil says, that the Turkish Cypriot side is dependent on the Turkish economy. So again, that's also a side to it. If the Turkish economy even more weakens and it's becoming even more bad as it is today, then of course that would also inflict upon the Cyprus side, the Turkish Cyprus side. And also, if I can add on the perhaps upcoming EU sanctions towards Turkey, I think that that would be counterproductive in trying to change Turkey's manners in the Eastern Mediterranean. Because I think that as it is now, Erdogan is blamed for the economic situation in Turkey. But if EU inflicts more sanctions that kind of worsens the people's daily lives, I think that they would turn the blame to the EU. And that would also be Erdogan's narrative. He would frame EU sanctions in line with already existing narratives in Turkey that goes along the lines of that the Western world wants to push Turkey down. And these sentiments are also shared not only by the Erdogan's constituencies, but also more general in the country. So instead of kind of letting Erdogan fall by his own actions, then the blame for the economic situation would be shared with the EU.
We have a question here from Bjarte Bjørsvik. More or less, I see agreeing on an analysis made, but twisting this, asking what can be done to stimulate more cooperation and trust building between Turkey and the regional powers and the EU. Good question. Any thought on that?
Well, yes, there is definitely a need for more trust building on both sides, I think. But if you look at it from the EU side, I think that it's really important that the EU kind of deal with Turkey in a real political manner, that they kind of openly acknowledge Turkey's interest and security, kind of security concerns in all of the regions. As I said, Turkey is in a very conflict-ridden neighborhood. So I think that is important. And also economic initiatives would work good at this point. And also this following up on their rhetoric, and also not try to avoid positioning in double standards. I think that would be a good start. And of course, from Turkish side, not having this inflammable rhetoric would also help. Not calling President Macron as a mad person. Yeah, but I think also that this is not a quick fix. This would take years to fix these trust issues.
Any thoughts, Kjetil?
Yeah, at least I think that since the Cyprus issue is so, in many ways, central to this, the whole, not in all ways, of course, but I think that it doesn't have to do directly with the relation to Turkey, but it would have been very wise, I think, to sort of to recognize the Turkish Cypriots on a more at the same level as the Greek Cypriots in negotiations, and that would also maybe ease the tensions with Turkey, even though Turkey wants a sort of hand in there. But I don't think it would be easy for Turkey to insist on its dominant position if the EU were to sort of grant, if they had done it at least when they had this reunification will, and if they had managed to ease sanctions against the Turkish Cypriot community, it would have, it could have, maybe still can have positive influence on the. But then they also, I think, they also have to deal with the question of sovereignty and sovereign rights. I mean, outside in the waters and all this economic and energy issues.
Yeah.
I also think
Yeah, sorry, Siri, please.
I think also it's important to understand that in the case of Eastern Mediterranean, this is not something that is solely by Erdogan or the current leadership in Turkey. This is an issue that is agreed upon across political divisions in Turkey. And I don't think that we would see much difference if there was another government currently taking the decisions in Turkey. But of course, maybe the manner or the methodology would be different, but the strategy or the goals would be much the same.
I agree, and I also think that this a sort of constant thing in maybe in Turkish, not in foreign policy, maybe, but at least in Turkish political rhetoric has been this this rhetoric of force. You know, not. Long before Erdogan, there's great the pride that many Turks tell you. I mean that they really kicked the ass of the Greeks in 74, and I mean you have one of the biggest armies in the world, and so on and so on, and you see that in relation to the Kurdish question. It's this power and this aestheticization of the army, and this you know the central place of the army all the time in popular culture, so to say. That's very old, of course, coming at least back to Ataturk.
Yeah,
there's a question here acknowledging, because there has been a lot of work being done by civil society in Cyprus, including historical associations on both sides that have worked on the historical questions and have common guidelines for students how to study history. So it's a question for you, Kjetil. Because your emphasis on the history and the injustice, do you think a historic reconciliation process could help improve mutual understanding and how it could be implemented? Or is history just so much conflict that it's difficult to really break down and create a kind of common understanding?
I think it's a very complicated question, because you cannot just create history without sort of having a sort of emotional or deeper cultural rooting of that. I mean, there were attempts on this. It's a very interesting thing on the Turkish Cypriot side. There were attempts after power shifted from the right wing to the left wing. There were attempts to rewrite, and they actually introduced new school books in history, emphasizing the common history of Cyprus for Cypriots, because history textbooks and all official history writing in Cyprus has been the history of the motherlands or the fatherlands. You know, Cypriots being exemplars of Turks and Greeks. But this experiment, so to say, and you have had in Greece, it didn't reach the schools because of the massive protest. But in Turkish Cypriot community, this experiment was introduced, but then it was withdrawn again because the resistance was so high. And of course, this has to do with strategy and politics, but I think, at least from an anthropological perspective, it also has to do with sort of the whole society and how history is not only a narrative disconnected from everything else. It's also deeply connected to other stories and memories, and these memories are often structured by previous histories and stories and legends. And even in Cyprus, you had this. If you go back in history, you have all these folk songs, sort of lamenting the fall of Constantinople in 1453. It's very far away, but that was a part of the common historical legacy in a sense. So I mean, maybe it could be, but then there's an anthropologist called Rebecca Bryant. She has written a very interesting article about this possibility of creating a different story and the emergence of a Turkish Cypriot history writing in Cyprus that sort of emerged in, I think it was 2000, or I can't exactly remember when, but then they started to create a history with themselves as actors and not the Turks. So it can be done, but it depends on so many other things. It's not easy to sort of just replace history.
And,
it's not very short answer. Yeah.
Siri, excellent.
If I may add to that from a psychological point of view, and because what Kjetil says and this historical experience that they have, and also the historical narrative that has been created on both sides, they create lenses that to read the current situation through. So it's very difficult to shift these. But of course, that is something that has to be done in a reconciliation process.
We have overstayed our time, but there is one more question here, and then I have one more question. If you have time for 5 more minutes. The question is, what impact on the economy and political development in Cyprus might have that China is buying ports in the Mediterranean, such as Athens and Trieste? This is part of the Chinese Belt and Wagon thinking. And so I came a bit into it on Africa, but it really shows how extensive China is planning. Any thoughts on impact on Cyprus here? We know that there has been a lot of Chinese investments in Cyprus as well, but that has primarily been for Cyprus as a tax haven. I so far haven't seen much of Chinese direct investments, and that's more Russian investments. But it goes into the bigger questions on the battle between China on the trade and all the other powers. Any thoughts?
I think it's a sort of I don't have any insights in this at all, but I think it's sort of probably a bit difficult technical question also. What what would be the economical consequences of ownership of ports? Seems to be a sort of very complex question, I think.
But I think maybe it reflects the kind of power competition that is in this area. I didn't mention China, but it seems that they are also involved. And this connecting Africa, Middle East, Europe, Turkey, and the kind of nexus of commercial routes that, of course, China would be interested in, I guess.
My final question, and we've been touching upon this several times, but is there an option for a two-state solution? Because if at the moment it's only Turkey who have recognized northern Cyprus, could we believe that if they announce themselves as independent, would actually the rest of the world recognize them? No. Is there any more chance of that? And if somehow it's seen then and not a two-state, but more of an inclusion into Turkey, then Turkey is actually claiming land in the European part of Europe, member state of the European Union. Is that an option as well? Or is it more a likelihood that this just will be continued as a constant dialogue, hoping that the UN at a certain stage might come up with a solution? Can we foresee anything here, or is it just completely open?
Well, so I think it seems like it's really a sort of guardian knot. Because I really don't think that Turkey would have any would benefit from trying to annex northern Cyprus, because it would complicate everything so enormously. On the other hand, the two-state solution, it seems also very difficult, very, very difficult, because there will not be, it's very hard to see any possibility of international recognition. I mean, Pakistan and Bangladesh were initially, I think they initially tried to recognize it in '83 or something. Then they withdrew it because UN, and I mean, it's officially occupied. So, and it's, now it's also part of the EU, the entire island. So, I mean, I think that it would just continue, and of course it creates a lot of job opportunities for diplomats. So it's that's a good thing.
Siri.
Well. It certainly complicates things that Cyprus is within the EU. But I'm thinking that And I've been following another conflict lately, that big between Azerbaijan and Armenia over Nagorno-Karabakh. And of course, those two places are very different in almost all aspects. But it is something about Turkey being very eager to change the status quo and contributing to that. And I don't know, because it's too early and it's very complicated, but there might be attempts from the Turkish side to try to push kind of the conflict out of stalemate. But how they would do it, I don't know. But I think that one step is that they now openly said that they opted for the two-state solution. So we will see moving forward. It's on time that they can resolve it, but how, we don't know.
So the main conclusion is, let us continue to follow closely what's going on in the Eastern Mediterranean. Thanks a lot, Kjetil. Thanks a lot, Siri, and thanks a lot for those who attended here and posed questions. We will continue to follow this, I think. So let's see if there's anything coming up. Then let's reconnect. And thanks a lot for all of you, and thanks a lot for the seminar today. Bye.
Bye bye.